We'll give folks a few minutes to join. Like it's about 1:01. And then I'll start the recording and folks can check it out later if they miss the beginning of this. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And as you probably saw, this is being recorded. So if you miss a bit of it or you know someone who will be joining, they can catch the recording online later. I'm Shauna Dorsey with the Exarban Foundation, and I oversee the Nebraska Tech Collaborative and Intern NE powered by Exarban. And today I'm here joined by, I'll call you two my friends at this point. We're all buds here. With Dr. Mitch Harrion and Josie Schaefer, and Dr. Josie Schaefer, who I've worked with for the past year, 2 years now. This is our second project together, working on the just tech workforce trends, and they're going to share their insights with us today. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end of each of their presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to flip it over to Dr. Harrion, and we will get started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shauna, and thank you to the Tech Collaborative for sponsoring this research. This is the second study we've done for the Exarban Foundation or Tech Collaborative, and we've really appreciated the partnership with those folks over the past couple of years. I will go ahead and get started here. Hopefully everyone can see my full screen. Please let me know if you can, just so I'm sure we can move forward.
Looks good.
All right, thank you. So again, I'm Mitch Harrion. I'm with the University of Nebraska Bureau of Business Research. With this study, we examined the economic footprint of the Nebraska technology industry, looking at years 2019 to 2022. We had hoped to do 2023, but the data were not available at the time we began the study. So we focused on those 4 years. Okay, the purpose of the study was threefold. We sought to determine the number of workers in technology occupations in Nebraska. You can see the second bullet point, third bullet point. We also sought to determine the number of workers in technology industries in Nebraska. So to help everyone sort of keep those two things separate, for example, a software developer is an occupation that would be able to exist in businesses across industries. So a software developer is a type of worker that could work in healthcare, finance, insurance, transportation, various industries. Technology industries are a little more broad. So for example, a business classified as a software publisher can employ many occupations. So these businesses might employ software developers to actually produce the software they're selling, but they may also employ managers, lawyers, accountants, sales managers, sales teams. So just to give everyone an idea of how we're pulling these things apart. And third, we sought to determine the economic footprint of the technology industry in Nebraska. So here, this will be at the very end of the presentation. We used Implan was the software we use. It's an industry standard piece of software that allows you to determine economic impact estimates for various industries. So essentially what we do is we take this industry information, plug that into Implan, and we get estimates back about how much the tech industry is impacting the Nebraska economy. And one thing I guess I would point out up front is we're calling this an economic footprint rather than an economic impact, because not all these dollars are truly new dollars that are coming to Nebraska. So we're just looking at the economic activity sort of within the borders of the state here. So just to get into some of the technical details of how we went about conducting the study, first we had to determine what constitutes a technology occupation and what constitutes a technology industry. There may be some disagreement between folks, even on this Zoom call, as to what should or should not be included in this analysis. Rather than make a judgment call on our own, we look to the existing literature Specifically, we looked at an organization, the Computing Technology Industry Association Cyber States Report from 2023. They have a report they put out every single year. It looks at state level data. It looks at metro level data as well. It breaks things out. You can see by the standard occupation codes, occupational classification codes for the occupation data, and breaks things out by the North American Industry Classification System for the industry data. In that report, again, it's very interesting. If you go, it's very easy to find. It's freely available online. If you go look at the report, they also do some economic impact estimates in their report. Their data are a little broader than ours. They use some, we rely entirely on government data, publicly available government data. They use some proprietary data that we don't have access to generate some of their estimates. So you might see some different information in their report than what you see here, and that's probably why. So where do we get our data? We look to the Bureau of Labor Statistics to get occupation data. We look at the occupational employment and wage statistics data. This is a survey-based data set where the federal government surveys small businesses in the U.S. to collect data on the occupations that exist here in the U.S., their wages, their prevalence in various states, things of that nature. We also relied upon the quarterly census of employment and wages for industry data. So these data are administrative data pulled from state unemployment insurance databases. And finally, we also relied upon the Bureau of Labor Statistics National Employment Matrix, which allowed us to see, and I'll show you this in a minute, allowed us to see the extent to which various occupations exist within industries. And again, I'll show that here in a moment. So there were some challenges in the data analysis. So SOC codes change over time. So those occupation codes get changed over time for whatever reason. NAICS codes change periodically, again, for whatever reason. So for example, software publishers, they were reassigned NAICS codes between 2017 and 2022, I believe it was. So if you tried to do a longitudinal analysis, pulling data from 2017, 2018 through 2022 or 2023, you see some different codes being used for similar industries, and there's not a direct one-to-one match on those. It's probably too much to get into here, but it does cause a little bit of it is a little bit of a burden when you're trying to do the longitudinal portion of looking at how occupations or industries change over time. A second challenge that we face doing this analysis, especially with industry data, some data are suppressed, especially in cases where only a small number of firms are present. So for example, here in Nebraska, I believe there's only a couple of like computer manufacturing businesses in the state. I believe those data were suppressed, meaning the federal government does not present those data because it might allow competitors or whoever else to see specific information. So if there's only 2 firms in a state that are doing business in a specific industry, it'd be pretty easy to draw some firm conclusions about how many people those people are employing or wages paid or things like that. So the federal government suppresses those data. In those cases, what we did is we looked to neighboring states around Nebraska to kind of get industry averages of the number of workers per firm on those industries of small numbers of businesses here in the state of Nebraska. If surrounding state data were not available, then we would look to national averages and impute those things for Nebraska. I will say these data imputation techniques did not have a large impact on our total number of workers in any particular industry. It's just something we did to make sure that we covered our bases and didn't just simply fail to count employment in an industry where we know there's probably people employed. Okay, so that's a little bit about the background of the study and how we went about managing and handling data and data issues. So let's just take a look at the total number of technology workers. So these are the total number of folks that work in occupations classified by CompTIA as working in technology industries. You can see over time here from 2019 to 2022, the numbers relatively flat. It goes up about 800 over that time. You can see the dip in 2020, presumably COVID related, a bounce back in 2021, and then exceeding the previous high of 2019 here in 2022. And looking at the 2023 data, we would expect that it has maybe even gone higher than that. So that's a very broad look at occupation data. Let's get into more specifics here. So here we're looking at the top 10 occupations here in the state of Nebraska as of 2020. So you look down that right-hand column for 2022. You can see software developers are the most prevalent tech occupation here in the state of Nebraska. Computer user support specialists, computer and information systems managers, computer systems analysts, so on and so forth. You can see industrial engineers and some other maybe harder sciences or other occupations that some may not associate with, a tech job that may not be directly related to working with computers or manufacturing or anything like that. So again, this goes back to the CompTIA classification of the occupations that they pulled in. Again, we were just trying to draw on the extant literature to do the best job we could at bringing in those occupations that have been previously classified as tech related. Okay. Some notable occupations with growth from 2021 to 2022. We see computer hardware engineers, 2.8% growth is not huge. Computer network architects, 2.5%, again, not that large. But I would say that there were no occupations that had really, really high growth from 2021 to 2022. So it's fairly stable. I would also point out that there weren't many occupations that saw a decrease in in employment either. So kind of slow, steady growth in all these occupations here over at least looking at 2021 to 2022. So now I think this gets into an interesting look at occupation. So these are, along the left-hand side, you can see the industry classifications. And the right-hand column gives you the percent of workers in those industries that work in technology occupations. Okay, so you can see that information industry, about 32.9% of all workers in that industry would fall into these occupations that we are classifying as tech related. The next highest is for professional, scientific, and technical services. I guess to give you a little bit of information about the information industry, that does include some software publishing. It includes a wide range of things, even like motion picture production. It includes a lot of things, but my sense is the 32.9% is probably driven by the folks that are doing software publishing and internet publishing, things of that nature. Professional, scientific and technical services. This includes a wide range of businesses. So these are accountants, attorneys, again, a wide range of business types. About a quarter of all workers in that industry are classified as tech workers. And some other relatively large proportions that we see are within the management industry, utilities, and manufacturing. So what does this mean in terms of raw value? So these are percentages, but yes, we can't necessarily see from this chart, how big is that manufacturing industry? 10% of all those workers are in a tech occupation. So how many workers is that? This table helps kind of tease that out. So we can see again, let's use manufacturing as an example. We see about 11,000 workers. Again, looking back here, 10% of workers, about 11,000. So, there's just over 100,000 manufacturing jobs. So jobs in the manufacturing industry. in the state of Nebraska. So about 11,000 of those, around 10% or so, 10.5%, are tech workers. So presumably these would be those mechanical engineers, people building software, things of that nature. The highest proportion, again, from this previous slide we saw was in the information industry, that 32.9%. That equates to about 6,000 workers. So the information industry is not huge here in Nebraska in terms of a total number of workers in that industry. The professional, scientific, and technical services industry is a little bit larger here in the state. Again, 16% of 23% of workers in that industry are tech related. That comes out to about 11,835 workers. So I think this is interesting. Just seeing where those technology occupations are more likely to exist. And this chart just gives you a sense of, so we use that national employment matrix to pull this chart together. This just shows some of these percentages. So that percent employment, that second row, the column should say 2022. So this is the percentage of employment in technology occupations in 2022, in what it's projected to look like in 8 years from 2022. And the right-hand column is just a difference between those values. So the largest growth is, we're expected to see the largest growth in tech occupations within the information industry. Again, that industry is not that large here in the state. The second 2.2% growth in professional, scientific, and technical services, where that industry is a little bit larger here in Nebraska. Okay. All right, so let's move to talk about those technology industries in Nebraska. So we used a similar approach here. We went out and looked at those industries that have been classified by CompTIA as tech-related or tech-specific. We summed up the values of workers in those industries. In this chart presents the results of that fairly straightforward analysis. So we see an increase of nearly 3,000 workers from 2019 to 2022. Okay. The next table gives you a sense of more specifically where those workers are in what industries. So custom computer programming services, nearly 6,100 workers. Engineering services, about 6,000. Software publishers, nearly 6,000. Computer systems design services, about 5,500, and so on and so forth. So this gives you a good idea of where those workers are in what industries we're seeing the most employment. This one gives you a little bit of a sense of how things have changed, perhaps. Things have not changed a lot over the course of 3 or 4 years. Custom computer programming services, a gain of about 600 employees. I guess that's a gain of nearly over 10%. Engineering services, again, a gain of about 500 employees there over the last 3 or 4 years. Software publishers, here we see a huge number, huge increase, but this is due to that change in the NAICS classification that I referenced earlier. So this is where it gets tough to make a apples to apples comparison over time on some of these industries, just because they change some of these NAICS codes and SOC codes. So, but those first 2 rows, those are stable. So we can see that there has been some growth in those industries in terms of workers. So it's important to also acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of small businesses in Nebraska that do not employ individuals. So it might be a sole proprietorship. It might be an LLC with one individual working and no employees. These are called non-employer establishments. And these are businesses that we wanted to make sure we also accounted for in our analysis. There's a data set out there, the non-employer statistics, that you can use to generate estimates for our purposes of how many of these businesses actually exist in these tech industries that we're interested in. I won't go into the details. Don't have a lot of time left, but I won't go into the details, but there are ways to compute or estimate the number of businesses in these different areas that we're interested in. And we get about 7,000, not quite 7,000 workers, 7,000 more workers that we estimate are in the tech industry that work at non-employer establishments here in the state of Nebraska. And we break this out in the report. We break this table out into more specific detail if you are interested in seeing really where these businesses lie. So that takes me to the final slide. I bounced ahead a little bit here, but what we do for this last analysis to estimate the economic footprint of the tech industry here in the state of Nebraska. Let's go back a couple of slides. We take these workers, so that right-hand column from 2022, 36,534 workers. Okay, we know that's the number of workers we get from the QCEW data. Bounce ahead a couple slides. We sum that total up with this total from the far right column, about 7,000 workers. And we use this information to generate our economic impact estimates through, again, IMPLAN is the software we use. So we punch that information into IMPLAN. We assign a corresponding value of workers to each of the industries that we see in our data to generate an economic impact estimate. And here are the results. So what the data show, when we think about direct, indirect, and total, so the direct output or business activity, we see about $10.8 billion from these businesses engaged in the technology industry. So that's the estimate of the business activity of these businesses. The indirect effect, you can think of that as businesses do business with other organizations here in the state of Nebraska, there's more economic activity generated. As workers in those businesses go out and spend their paychecks on household goods and items, goods and services, there's even more economic activity generated. So summing those two things together is what we call the indirect impact. And when you sum this all up, we get about a $19.7 billion impact from the tech industry, supporting about 91,000 jobs with a total labor income of about $6.9 billion here in the state. And that is the final slide I have. So if you are interested in learning more, if you have any follow-up questions, I'd be happy to take any questions right now. Or if you have any follow-up questions offline, I'm happy to take any emails you might have. I also have the report available that I can send out to whoever's interested in reading it. With that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much. I did drop the link to the report into the chat, and
okay.
So folks have access to that. But we do have a few minutes if you have questions, and if something comes up and you think of it, feel free to drop it in the Q&A and we'll keep an eye on it. Someone did ask if we'll be sharing a link to your presentation. If you're good with that, I can send that out. Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you the file.
Okay, so we'll do that too. Great. Well, without further ado, again, I've said that twice. That's so funny. Introducing Dr. Schaefer here. So she is going to walk through the Nebraska Tech Workforce Dashboard with you all. And this again is a refresh from our dashboard in 2023. So turning it over to Josie, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Mitch. Great presentation as always. Appreciate the Exarban Foundation and the Nebraska Tech Collaborative for hosting this today. I am going to share the dashboard. I do not have a separate presentation. I am trying to push as many folks to this dashboard as possible. So just so you know where it lives, it's on the nebraskatechcollaborative.com website, and it's right there at the top, data dashboard. We also have a copy of it on our website, but it should be easy to find. Everyone seeing it okay? I think so.
Yes.
Thank you, Shauna. I do suggest that you throw it in full screen when you're looking at it. There's a ton of data in here. So I just want to distinguish the project a little bit from Mitch's project and the goals of the project. And you'll see some similar data, but it might look a little bit different between the two projects, and that's for a few reasons. So Mitch is looking much more, he looks somewhat at occupations, but he's looking much more at industries. Occupations are a classification of the work individuals do, while industry is a classification of the work at the establishment, right? So you can have a tech company, but a tech company might also have administrative assistants and a janitor, right? So slightly different classifications that will reveal different numbers about employment. That's one distinction. Now, that focus is really important for building up to those economic impact numbers. In contrast, we want to deep dive into the individuals within these occupations. We want to look at the demographics of folks in the tech occupations, where they work, how they work, and so that individual level is why we focus more on occupations. We also use different data. They are related. They all talk to each other in some way. But Mitch's data mostly comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which really collects administrative data through the industries, through the business establishments. We're looking much more at census data, which is usually surveys of individuals, and they define how they work and where they work and things like that. So even when we're reporting occupation numbers, which you would think, oh, they're going to be the same, they might be slightly different. Now, we've looked at each other's projects, so we know they're not way off. But if you're really looking at a specific number, you know, software developers in the Omaha Metro, you may he's pulling from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm pulling from the Census Bureau. Even for the same year, they may look slightly different. But again, we're answering different questions and we're using the data a little differently. So it's important to have the right source to answer the questions we have. So given my focus is on individuals, I won't spend too much time sort of going over some of this bigger, broader who's working in these occupations and industries because Mitch did a great job covering that. I'll just sort of add where the dashboard is a little different, and then we'll get down to some demographic data. So this is the first screen of the dashboard. You can roll over a state and see the number of tech workers. Like Mitch, we had to spend some time classifying what is tech versus non-tech. Now, this non-tech occupation group is a huge group, right? It includes everything other than tech workers. So it's not very specific, but just to give you some sense, and you also have some options to go back in time. But what I think is really interesting here is the ability to look at the percent of the overall workforce that is tech by state. If you've seen any of my other work with census data around occupation and occupation mix, I think density of occupations is a really important factor for growth and development in those fields. So right now, the percent of the workforce that is tech in Nebraska is 5%. That's a fairly low number as you compare to some other states. Even similarly sized states are going to have a little bit more. Where's Iowa in the list? Actually, they're right below us here in 2022. They have more workers though. But you can also go back in time and look at that percent to start getting a sense of how things move. Actually, sorry, I'm on non-tech versus tech. So there you go. You can look at those type of things, not focus too much though on those employed count. You can also see it here over time if you're just looking for that view and compare to other states. Here's where we get into the specific occupations. Just as Mitch was mentioning, certain occupations we're more interested in growing, or we're more interested in comparing to other states to see how we're growing. So you have some choices there. You can look over time and compare to other states. Nebraska will always stand out there in red. Just another view of that to see what the sort of overall mix of occupations in tech is. This is where Nebraska is in 2022, according to the United States Census Bureau data. Can always go back in time to see how the mix has changed. It really has changed. I'll tell you, there are several occupations within the tech sector that nobody even works in anymore. There's one like, yeah, data entry keyers in 2011 was a pretty important job. I don't even think you can find it on there in 2022. So really interesting insight into sort of the history of tech that you can take from that view. That's also by state. But here's where the dashboard really goes into a different direction while Mitch builds up to that economic impact. I want to drill down into who are those people that work in tech. So this is the first view that allows you to do this. This right now is just available for Nebraska, but you do have it by year, and you can look at the percent of folks in tech and non-tech by these different demographics. This one loads to women. So right now in the tech workforce in Nebraska, 24.9% are women. I'll show you that over time, while the non-tech workforce is actually just about half women. So that's an interesting distinction, right? The tech workforce is not women are not well represented in the tech workforce. You can also look at other age characteristics, right? The tech workforce is a little younger than the non-tech workforce. You can look at different race groups. Tech workforce, 7.2% identify as Asian. 8.6% identify as Latino or Latina. You'll see that the tech workforce, 37.6% of those folks have bachelor's degrees to work in the tech workforce. We talk a lot about tech being a high skill job. That's one metric to demonstrate that is true, while 22.7% of the non-tech workforce have a bachelor's degree. So it is a very skilled workforce. And so you can look at that in all sorts of different ways. And you can also see changes over time, but we went ahead and just built a separate one for that so you could look at that over time. So here's women, the percent of the tech workforce only in women, and you actually see steady decline. We used to be better represented in the tech workforce. That was something we were really interested in, Shauna and I, so I'll show you a little bit more about that. But you can look at that for other groups. Latino, Latina has become better represented over time. I will say you're going to see some bumping around in numbers. There's a margin of error on this data. It is survey data, right? So, and then we're cutting the survey data, right? We're grouping by tech workers, then we're grouping by Latino tech workers. So there is going to be some bumping around in the data that is probably more describing the survey sample more than it is actually describing big changes from year to year. But when I look at this, yeah, I would say there's probably a little bit of a gradual increase. That was probably just an off year in the data. But we can see how it's sort of changed over time. I think we see the bachelor's degrees have come up a fair bit. And you can sort of make your own assessment about how that has worked over time. Like I said, well, going back here just again, we were really surprised by the share of women having come down in the tech workforce. I think we like to think that there has been a lot of efforts within this state. I've seen a lot of efforts within this state to promote workforce access and equity, particularly in the tech industry where there are such great opportunities. These are high wage, high skilled jobs. Women are very skilled in this state, getting bachelor's degrees at higher rates than men right now. So we were interested, what's going on. So we started to break down some of those variables even a little bit more. So now in this particular view, we look at women by these other demographic characteristics just to get a little bit of a better sense of what's going on. So remember, we saw Latino, Latina going up. Now, just for Latinas, we had seen a good trend going up, and then we saw a little pull down. Among these tech workers, it's, women with high school degrees or less. We're starting to see that sort of bump around and maybe come down a little bit. This was surprising. You would think women with graduate degrees would be in the tech workforce at really high rates. They may be in the workforce they are in the workforce at really high rates, but they're not going into tech as much. Again, we're breaking down that data more and more and more. So when I see that, I think less that was actually what it was that year and just a little bit of a survey sample issue. But you really just don't see the growth of women in the tech force, and it helps you to kind of think about where that all starts. And how different groups are being represented. That looks like a big decline to me, right? We look a lot at migration data. We're really well known for that data, working with that data set. And people of color are generally more likely to outmigrate. Tech workers are also more likely to outmigrate. So when I do see this, I think, oh, right after the COVID-19 pandemic, a group of women that identify as Black and work in the tech sector said, I can probably do better somewhere else, and they outmigrated, and that might explain that big jump out. So again, just trying to break down some of that individual level data so we can start to identify policies, programs, practices that make sure we have access, that everybody knows they can have a great job in the tech sector here in Nebraska. We are a small enough state that we can't let people creep out. So we want to make sure that we are building policies and practices that let folks work here. So that gets into that individual level data. We also have some interesting stats. This is from the current population survey, which is the United States Census Bureau working with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, looking at some of the attributes of tech workers' work, how they work. So this is the percent tech versus non-tech that are full-time workers. You can put more years in there, but it just gets a little bit hard to see. So we'll just look at it. This data is quarterly. And so you see tech workers are more likely to be employed full-time as compared to non-tech. Again, non-tech is a really large workforce grouping. Flip side, to have the same job as last month, tech workers are jumping around. You want higher means they're more in the workforce. So they were at some point, but jumping around a little bit more than non-tech workers. Working more than one job, you see non-tech workers are generally more likely to be working more than one job than tech workers here in Q4 of 2023, a very, very small number. And again, you can bring in other states to identify if patterns are similar, which on this particular metric, on just these couple I'm clicking on, that seems true. Let's just grab Iowa for a minute. Yeah, okay. So a little bit, that went up high. Quarterly data bumping around a little bit, lots of breakdowns, but generally tech workers are less likely to work more than one job in Iowa. For the same job as last month. Oh, tech workers are a little bit more likely in the last couple of quarters to stay in place as compared to the non-tech. So interesting trends by state. And again, you can build in more years. So Mitch built out to that bigger economic impact. I'm interested in those individual level impacts of working in tech. So we went and deep dived into wages of, again, this is workers in tech. This is occupation data. This is median hourly wage by state for tech workers. This is an important number. So $30 an hour looks pretty good here at the median compared to some of our neighbor states outside of Colorado. Right? We certainly want that to be competitive if we're trying to attract workers. We can go back just a couple years on that, certainly come up over time. That's really good news, and remained fairly competitive over time. Again, you can click on the non-tech one, but that is such a wide array of occupations that it's not particularly helpful. And then we broke that down by demographics, right? So if women are leaving the workforce in tech, what plausible explanation might we have for that? And one is, hey, they just don't get paid what they want to get paid. So we can select tech workers for 2022. I'm going to jump down here to gender since we've been talking about this. We're on women. Nebraska is highlighted in red. So this is saying that in 2022, women tech workers made an average hourly wage of $29. Going back to that last view, the overall median was 30. This is how we compare to other states for women, kind of right in the middle-ish to a little bit low. Iowa right above us, women making just about the same amount of money there. But when we switch to men in tech in 2022 are making $37 on average per hour. So there is certainly a wage gap. What this view is nice for, you can compare to the other states and you actually see women, there's a wage gap for most states, but Nebraska's was a little bit smaller as compared to men, compared to other states are earning a little bit less in tech. So generally, I would say we're just not as competitive to all states. We were fairly competitive to neighbor states for our wages, but not necessarily all states from this view. But also when we wonder why women are leaving in tech, even among those with bachelor's degrees and things like that, which we could look at that other view, they are making less than men. We can see that for some others. So this is Latino, Latina, hourly wage $32, not Latino, Latina, hourly wage 35. The Latino, Latina rates are competitive compared to other states, but less than if you are not Latino, Latina. You also have several race groups as well as educational attainment. So for instance, among Nebraskans, hourly wage in tech, if you have a college degree, is $42 an hour compared to no college, which is $29 an hour on average. So that's some of what you can do at that individual level of analysis and then comparing out to other states. After this, the dashboard kind of is a review of all those same views, but it's focused on metropolitan areas, specifically Omaha, Council Bluffs, and Lincoln. The only thing I'll point out here, what's nice about this is then you can excuse me, you can calculate how many workers are in the metros in tech versus the rest of the state. I think I calculated so there's 30,000 here in the Omaha metro, another 11,000. There was just over 50,000 in the whole state. So that leaves 11,000-ish on balance of tech workers that are outside of the metros, which is just good information to have. And then this sort of walks through similar views, but focused at that metropolitan level of analysis, which I think those geographies are pretty important. Going back to my original point about density of occupations, when a lot of similar occupations are clustered within a geographic area, we have a lot of research that says there are these agglomeration effects, these innovation effects. It becomes easier for those businesses to grow when they have that density of workers with it that work in that field within that same place. So metro areas are an important level of analysis. But lots of different things you can build in. You can also do some comparing, right? How many people work in tech as a percent of their Austin's workforce versus Omaha's. Of course, those are two pretty hard comparisons. Bellingham, Washington too, but just some things that you can do with the dashboard. So I will stop there. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Great. Thanks again. No questions in the queue so far, but I'm going to throw up a short poll. It's just 2 questions for the audience. that we can cover. And now that we wrapped up these two presentations, Dr. Harrigan, if you don't mind coming back on, I just want to share why we did this. It's important to us at the NTC and Exarban to make sure that the projects that we're pursuing and different efforts that we plan to pursue, I should say, to pursue, are all in alignment with what the data is telling us. So seeing the polls come in, or the poll responses come in right now, and in recent conversations, I've heard a lot of folks tell me that work for some of our major employers and even smaller employers that finding software engineers is very challenging. So it's great. Not good to see that the data supports that, but just reminds us that this is an important area of tech for us to continue to work on. And I'm seeing in the polls right now that, data scientists, cybersecurity are also some challenges. So just good insights to have. Josie or Mitch, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Could you turn my camera back on? I think I'm.
Oh yeah, sorry.
There we go.
I'll just say the reason we went the dashboard route with our presentation of the analysis is because I think there are a lot of questions to be asked of the data and a lot of different ways to look at the data. We weren't trying to be conclusive. This is what it is. We were really trying to build something where folks could go in and say, well, wait, we've only grown this much in terms of software developers. So where did all the software developers grow, right? And you can go find that state. And then we can start to work backwards and say, well, what have they done in order to grow the number of software developers at that rate compared to our rate? The way that I was just sort of building in some of that analysis around wages or around demographics, right? I know that persons of color are more likely to leave the state of Nebraska. If you've seen me talk ever, you've heard me say that, right? And so then why wouldn't I think that was true in tech? Oh, wait, we can start to see that in tech too. Wages are competitive somewhat, but not compared to the coast. What does that mean for where people will move and where people will show up? Do we expect to see Nebraskans or just more software developers show up in states where they're paying higher wages? Yeah, I mean, we know that sort of logically or anecdotally, but now we can kind of see it in the data. And so then when we're trying to say, what can we do? We can look to these other states and get answers.
Right. We have one question in the chat, which is, what does the data look like when it comes to bachelor's versus associates versus just pursuing certifications in relation to finding employment?
Yeah, great question. So I'll just bring up that screen really quick. So, right, there are data challenges. Overall, just about 11% of the entire state population has an associate's degree. It's one of the smaller groupings. So we don't tend to break that one out. Here we have enrolled in school for the educational attainment of tech workers, enrolled in school, high school degree or less. Some college is that largest grouping right now in Nebraska. And then bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees. We don't have it broken down by associate's degrees because it tends to be a smaller grouping. So I can't speak specifically to associate's degrees, but we are seeing more tech workers are more likely to be a high-skilled bachelor's degree or more workforce compared to the non-tech group. That's what we can say here. I don't agree that tech requires a bachelor's degrees. I was just hanging out with a neighbor friend of mine's high school student that's building an app. It's good, right? So you don't even have to have a high school degree necessarily to be good at tech. I really understand that to be true. I think you all, right? I think folks that work in tech know that as well. Yet we definitely see bachelor's degrees being sort of part of the qualification list for getting jobs at tech companies. So certainly something to think about if you want to shake things up a little bit more. Certifications are really interesting. There's definitely a lot of work being done to start to track things like that. Folks are looking for that. The data sources that we are using do not have a lot of data about that. So I can't really tell you how that's impacting I can't tell you who in this data has certifications or not. I'm interested to hear from you all about how certifications are changing your approaches to hiring. I think that's a really important thing. I know we at the University of Nebraska at Omaha think certifications are really important and solve a workforce development challenge. So hopefully you all are taking that seriously and looking for those as compared to these distinct degrees. But right now I can tell you, without ever looking at your job application, right? Like the job qualifications you ask for, I'm going to guess most Nebraska tech companies are only hiring people with bachelor's degrees or more, just based on what I see in the data.
Any other questions? I'm going to throw one more poll question out there about bachelor's degrees. Let me do this really quick. All right.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Mitch, any additional insights you'd like to share?
Oh, I guess it just goes back to when I think about this analysis, I just think about the slides that show the proportion of tech workers in the various industries. So if there's going to be a targeted push, if you want to grow or you want to see where growth has occurred, I think it's important to look within those industries to see what are the needs of businesses in terms of tech workers, and in terms of a policy prescription or anything like that, maybe it makes sense to focus on businesses within those industries, see what things can be done to help those types of businesses grow, if the goal is to increase the number of tech workers in the state.
Yeah, and I know that I've seen a lot of companies, especially some of our newer, smaller startups, be more open and flexible when it comes to that degree requirement. A lot more of our established companies I see have had, it's been a little bit of a slower process to transition from 4 years required, or at least some degree, even an associate's required for a position. So it is good to see that shifting.
Yeah, let's see what that looked like over time.
Sorry, Josie, were you going to show something or say something?
Yeah, I was just
Okay.
just chit-chatting with myself.
Gotcha.
Here is the percent of the tech workforce that has a bachelor's degree over time. So we really haven't seen a drop. I would kind of say, if anything, that's been like a little bit of a steady increase, but a small increase. So it's staying about the same, but it would be interesting, right? It would not, in my opinion, I wouldn't say, oh, the tech workforce is losing its skill if suddenly that particular metric came down. So something to watch for, and there's a view built for every question.
Very true. I love it. Okay. So a link to the dashboard is in the chat as well. I'm going to share my screen for one moment and just show you all something that we're working on at Exarban in collaboration with our friends over at the Kiewit Corporation and Women in Tech of the Heartland and Code Crush at UNO. But based on the data that Josie shared, which we've been aware of for the last couple of years with the decline of women in tech, we are co-hosting a Women in Tech Summit at Kiewit on March 7th next year. I'll drop a link in the chat as well, but we are currently accepting submissions for people who want to sit on panels at this event. So there will be panel discussions on AI and machine learning, cybersecurity and data privacy, moving into tech leadership roles, and then the future of DEI and tech in Nebraska. There will also be an award ceremony where we will be highlighting women who are nominated from early career talent all the way up to senior leaders and innovators within our state. So everyone is encouraged to register for this event and attend the event. All the speakers will be Nebraska-based women in tech roles. So we look forward to having you guys there, and just want to thank everybody for the support. Just scrolling a little bit, but all the forums are active. So if you want to go out and cruise the page to learn more, including how to sponsor the event, we'd appreciate that. So with that, unless there are other questions, I will go ahead and close the webinar, and we'll be sending out links to everything that's in the chat and also the Women in Tech Summit as well. But thank
Awesome to see that come to fruition.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Thanks to
great
your work.
use of
It's
data.
like, oh, we need to. So thank you both, Mitch and Josie, for everything you do. And we'll see everybody later.
Thank you.
Thank you.